In the previous episode, Rick and the group arrived at a new community. The post-apocalyptic experience makes them not easily put down their weapons. Rick saw this as a two-way choice. He would only surrender their weapons if they decided to stay. Each person had to undergo an interview with the community's leader, Deanna. Rick was the first to be interviewed, and he conversed with Deanna about the situation. It turned out that her husband had built the walls of the community when the disaster struck. Rick suddenly realized that these people had been hiding here since the eschatology, completely unaware of the harsh realities outside. It explained why there were no guards on the walls. Deanna expressed her belief that the community needed people who had experienced the outside world. Rick's group seemed to be the most suitable team they had observed. Rick didn't hesitate to tell her directly that they should secure the community by closing the doors and arming themselves. He emphasized that in the outside world, people would do anything to survive, and he himself had killed countless others to protect his family and team. After listening to Rick, Deanna considered him to be a principled person. Thus, she earnestly invited Rick to help the community survive. This time, Rick didn't refuse. It was only natural for them to have their own motives, so he decided to stay, handed over their weapons, with the agreement that they could retrieve them when going out. There's one small detail worth mentioning if you look closely at Carol. She appears clumsy. The women in charge of the warehouse management thought she was a weak woman who couldn't use a gun. After Carol puts down her weapon, she awkwardly smiles. With their weapons taken away, Rick looks at Carol. During the interview, Carol presents herself as the team's caretaker, only capable of doing laundry and cooking. Deanna has no idea that Carol is a terrifying person. Consequently, Deanna assigns Carol a job taking care of the elderly. The community also assigned Rick's team a house with unimaginable amenities, a mansion configuration that even before the end of the world their family didn't necessarily have such luxury. There's even running water, and Rick takes a hot shower. It had been a long time since Rick had taken care of himself. Looking at the man in the mirror, there is a vicissitude in his unkempt appearance. A few minutes later, Rick cleaned up his beard, and he looked completely transformed from before. Then, there's a knock at the door. Standing at the doorstep is an incredibly beautiful woman, delivering food to them. Rick, with his perfect physique and irresistible charm, managed to strike up a conversation with a woman. She introduced herself as Jessie, a former hairdresser who offered to give him a trim. He indeed needed to tidy up his hair. Rick didn't decline the offer. The two chatted for a while in the process. Jessie revealed that she was already married with 2 children. After a while, the 3 of them met up. Each person had been assigned a separate house to live in, but they were scattered quite far apart. Rick thought it would be wise for everyone to live together for the first couple of days. Later evening, Deanna arrived at the house and noticed that everyone was gathered there. She didn't say much, understanding their initial lack of trust. The next day, they decided to explore the community. It was very quiet all around and they wanted to get to know the place better. However, as Rick walked, he suddenly realized Carl was missing. There was no one else around, and he started to worry. In his anxious search, he accidentally broke something. Just then, Jessie appeared and reassured Rick not to panic. She assured him that there was no danger in this place. Eventually, they found Carl in front of a house. Jessie explained that these seniors had a great fondness for children, and it had been a long time since they had seen any babies around. Rick finally felt relieved and realized that he had been overly sensitive. Carl, in this new place, had also found peers of his age. He encountered 3 children who were around his age. They engrossed in reading and playing games. One of the girls seemed indifferent to his presence. Carl was impressed and instead a few more glances. His father asked him about the new friends he had made. Carl says he liked it here. He liked the people here too, but they are weak. He doesn't want them to become like that. Rick nodded, satisfied with his son's awareness of eschatology. In the afternoon, 2 individuals from the community, Deanna's son Aiden and his partner Nicholas, stopped Glenn and the other 2. They asked Glenn's group to join them in searching for supplies. Aiden bragged about his military training at university, how good he was. Follow them out and he can show them how to survive out there. Glenn couldn't help but think, how can they guide us on what to do outside? Shortly after, they entered the woods, and as they walked, Aiden took the opportunity to impart knowledge to the group, and also made childlike tactical arrangements. He emphasized the importance of obeying his commands, clearly feeling quite confident in himself. The 3 individuals didn't want to argue with a child, so they refrained from rebutting or challenging him. Their purpose for coming here was not to search for supplies, but to capture a specific zombie. This particular zombie had previously killed 4 members of their group, so they sought revenge. Soon, they arrived at the location where the zombie was being held. but it had managed to break free from its chains. Nicholas, however, began whistling. Glenn's group immediately became tense, knowing that this would attract nearby zombies. These two individuals were truly peculiar. Aiden instructed Glenn's group to simply watch from the sidelines. Soon, the zombie that Aiden was looking for appeared. They didn't intend to kill it immediately. Instead, they wanted to torment it by restraining it. He also told Noah, who was trying to help, to back off. However, the zombie's decaying skin made it difficult to hold onto, and Aiden saw the zombie lunge towards him. He pushed the zombie straight into Tara's arms. Nicholas is still around shouting, "Don't kill it." Tara struggled to hold the zombie back, and Glenn couldn't hold back any longer. He stabbed the zombie in the head. They erupted into conflict, but Glenn, being of a gentle nature, didn't want to stir up further trouble. Upon returning to the community, Aiden continued to taunt and mock Glenn's group, saying they lacked the courage and were unfit for the outside world. Glenn retorted directly, "You're probably saying the opposite." Aiden was not happy to hear this and shouted for Glenn to stop. However, Glenn paid no attention to him. He angrily questioned why they didn't follow his commands, claiming they had their own rules. The two men just argued and the residents around them gathered around to see what was going on. Glenn expressed that if they had listened to Aiden, they would have met the same fate as his previous teammates. Aiden's pride couldn't handle such a remark. Tiana, being drawn to the commotion, arrived at the scene. Aiden immediately complained, accusing Glenn of not following the rules, and questioning why his mother had brought these savages into the community.
Because we actually know what we're doing out there.
These people should be glad they didn't become Rick their enemy, otherwise they wouldn't dare be so arrogant and would be shaking in fear in the corner. At that moment, Rick arrived as well, urging Daryl to let it go. Michonne stood before Aiden and asked if he wanted to fight. Finally, the conflict ended when Rick and Deanna put a stop to it. Deanna, observing Rick's actions, appointed him and Michonne as the community's lawkeepers to maintain its safety, but without the use of firearms. Rick didn't refuse, understanding that they were living in someone else's territory. Later that night, the three of them gathered again. Rick wore his police uniform. The last time he wore it was a year ago. He suggested that they could settle down here and return to their respective houses to sleep. However, Carol expressed her concern that if they became too comfortable, they would let their guard down and become weak. Rick recalled Carl saying the same thing but assured Carol that they wouldn't become weak. Deanna used to be a congresswoman and appointed Rick and Michonne as lawkeepers. She even had fantasies of developing the community into a nation. However, Rick had no interest in her grandiose vision. He believed that these people only knew how to play politics within the community and had no understanding of the harsh realities outside. Rick directly suggested to Deanna that they needed to arm themselves and have people patrolling the walls every day. Zombies may not have thoughts, but nowadays, it's the humans who are the most dangerous. However, Deanna flatly rejected his suggestion, saying that the community was fine with the system governing it and did not need violent involvement. She mentioned that there would be a welcoming party at her house that evening and hoped everyone would attend. In the afternoon, Rick, Carol, and Daryl met outside to discuss matters privately. They believed that the people in the community lacked a sense of vigilance. They must have a weapon in their hands. Carol suggested that the handguns in the armory were rarely used, and even if a few were taken, no one would notice. They decided to find an opportunity to steal them. Their conversations are kept confidential and it is not considered necessary for other members to know. Carol's exceptional disguising skills came into play. She seamlessly integrated herself with the women of the community, who perceived her as a virtuous and delicate woman. Just then, Rick approached. Carol saw the party as an opportunity. Knowing that almost everyone would attend, she believed that slipping away during the event would give her a chance to obtain the handguns. Moreover, she was the most suitable person for the task, as no one would pay attention to someone as inconspicuous as her. Carol then went to the warehouse and told the woman she needed some ingredients to make biscuits and chatted in the meantime. At that moment, a group of men arrived, ready to take some weapons for their outing. The woman went in to take care of the registration, politely allowing Carol to retrieve the materials she needed on her own. Carol's acting skills were remarkable. After obtaining the ingredients, she calmly strolled into the armory, pretending to browse around. One of the men teasingly asked her if she was afraid of guns. Carol replied even more softly that she had a pistol outside, but she couldn't hit the zombies, couldn't even lift rifles like the ones in the armory. Saying this, she approached the window, and the men showed no suspicion. On the contrary, they enthusiastically offered to teach her how to shoot. Once everyone left, nobody noticed that the lock on the window had been tampered with. As evening approached, the preparations for the party were underway. Carol arrived with her cookies, followed by Rick, who was dressed handsomely. Abraham and Rosita were also dressed more formally. Tiana, accompanied by her husband Reg, walked over and introduced them to each other. Reg is the creator of the community wall and the founder of the community. The two of them engaged in casual conversation for a while. Rick's eyes were soon drawn to one person, naturally Jessie, who had just arrived. Bummed out that her two sons and husband are also here, most of them come to the party with their families, making Noah's solitary presence appear somewhat desolate. Fortunately, Glenn and Maggie approached him to offer comfort. Daryl also changed his clothes and stood by the door, observing for a while before leaving. Such gatherings were not quite suitable for him. Meanwhile, Carol and Rick were awaiting someone, the woman in charge of guarding the armory. When they spotted her entering, Carol initiated her plan. Before long, she made her way to the armory. Climbing in through the window, she proceeded to pack several handguns into a bag. Carol didn't expect a child to follow her. Jesse's youngest son Sam, he followed, hoping to get more biscuits. Didn't expect to follow here. Carol enthusiastically offered to bake him a whole oven full of biscuits, but Sam had to promise not to tell anyone she'd been here, especially his mother. Carol warned Sam that if he were to tell her, the next day he would wake up outside the walls, tied to a tree, with no one coming to rescue him. The monsters will come to get him. After hearing Carol's words of coaxing and threatening, Sam promised not to tell anyone. The next day, Carol discreetly brought the firearms out, while Rick concealed a small handgun behind him. They nonchalantly returned to the community as if nothing had happened. In the afternoon, Aiden prepared to go out again with Glenn and the others. They arrived at a warehouse in search of supplies, without mentioning their previous unpleasant encounter. After a thorough inspection, they discovered numerous zombies blocking the main entrance of the warehouse. They had no choice but to sneak in from the back. Glenn knocked on the door with force, but there was no response from inside. The group cautiously entered with their weapons ready. The warehouse was filled with goods, and they had to split up to investigate further. As they walked, they could faintly hear the growls of zombies. Based on Glenn's experience, it seemed that the zombies were being obstructed by something. When came inside, there was a door that separated some zombies. There must be at least 20 to 30 of them. However, Glenn remained calm, assessing the security of the iron door. It appeared to be sturdy enough, allowing them to search for supplies without worry. Aiden felt a bit nervous but couldn't help but admire the abilities of Glenn and the others. All of this is built up from experience. Tara and Eugene, on the other side, also found the necessary materials for ensuring the community's power supply. At that moment, a zombie approached Aiden from behind. When he turned around, he saw a fully armed soldier. Somewhat alarmed, he fired straight away, but this zombie was wearing a helmet. Glenn outside the rack also noticed the zombie and told Aiden to stop and get closer before aiming for the neck to kill it. However, in an attempt to prove himself, Aiden shot the zombie in the leg. It was then that Glenn carefully observed the fallen zombie and urgently shouted for Aiden to stop. As the zombie was carrying a grenade, tragedy struck as a small explosion knocked down several people. After a few minutes, Glenn regained his feet and quickly checked on the others. Sadly, Aiden had been impaled by the shelves and appeared lifeless. Glenn was a little sorry. At this point, the zombies also came out, and he hurriedly called out the names of the others. Fortunately, Noah was unharmed. Upon hearing Eugene's voice, they ran towards him. Eugene was intact, but Tara had suffered a severe head injury and had lost consciousness. Glenn asked Eugene to give them cover. The two of them took Tara away. Eugene's hands were trembling uncontrollably. He was really too timid. Just as he hesitated, a zombie pounced on him from the side. Fortunately, Glenn came to his rescue in time. Now they had to evacuate quickly. The group temporarily hid in an office. Tara's condition was not optimistic, and she was losing blood too quickly. The medical supplies were only in the car. They had to get her into the car as soon as possible. Just as they were preparing to retreat, shouts could be heard from outside. "Oh my God!" Aiden was still alive. He was crying out for help. Nicholas did not want to risk saving him at this time, but after repeated requests from everyone, he no longer objected. At this moment, Eugene became much braver. He promised to take good care of Tara. He had always liked Tara a lot. Glenn didn't hesitate anymore either. He temporarily commanded Nicholas to launch a signal flare to attract the zombies. Then he and Noah would fight their way out. After the three of them were ready, led by Glenn, they opened the door. Eugene also changed from his usual cowardice. He whispered to Tara to hold on. Then he looked at the open door outside and secretly made up his mind to get Tara out. He carefully opened the door. Fortunately, the zombies had been drawn away by them. He gasped nervously and headed outside. Whenever he encountered a zombie, he suppressed his fear and killed it. Glenn also arrived at Aiden's location. His situation was even more dire. 2 steel pipes pierced through his body. Glenn comforted him, telling him not to be afraid, assuring him that they would save him, but he warned him to endure the pain and not make a sound. Aiden nodded. However, the process was incredibly painful, and he unintentionally let out a scream. Glenn had no choice but to ask Nicholas to try again. The zombies have followed the sound and are approaching the area. Noah is killing zombies with a pistol, while Nicholas had already lost his composure. He whispered in Aiden's ear, "I'm just trying to save myself. Don't blame me. We've all abandoned teammates before." After saying that, he ran away. Glenn couldn't stop him either. He alone couldn't save Aiden. More and more zombies were closing in. Aiden knew he would not survive. He said to Glenn, "Last time, Nicholas and I abandoned our teammates. Now it's my retribution. You guys should leave quickly." There is no way. A large group of zombies had already surrounded them. Noah could only pull Glenn away, and in the end, the zombies devoured Aiden. Meanwhile, Nicholas had also run to the lobby. Glenn and Noah followed closely behind. When they reached the outside, they saw zombies waiting for them. The zombies from inside gradually made their way to the lobby as well. After firing a few shots, their magazines were empty. The 2 of them had no choice but to run towards the exit. In the end, they, along with Nicholas, became trapped in the revolving glass doors at the same time.